Hey, everybody, it's Natalie Bencavanga, and welcome to Facts Over Fear. I've got a really interesting show for you today. So, we're going to take a little trip to Philadelphia. Philadelphia has been sitting on a toxic time bomb. Did you guys know this? I didn't, and I've learned this recently, and I was so shocked and bewildered by what was going on. I was like, we have to do a conversation around this. This time bomb has been ticking for over 2 decades. And now that the cleanup is finally underway, there's just one glaring problem. There's actually no real plan for how to deal with the long-term ramifications of what is seeping into the ground around the community if we do not, in any meaningful way, address climate change. It's called the Franklin Slag Pile in Port Richmond, and it's packed with lead, copper, and industrial waste. It's been a known hazard for decades. Now officials are moving dirt, capping contamination, and they're calling it progress. But here's the question that not many people seem comfortable answering. What happens when this area, not if, but when this area floods? Okay, let's just think about where that pile is going to go, because this site sits in an area expected to see more flooding as the climate changes. And if that contamination gets disturbed or spread, which would happen, we're not talking about cleanup anymore. We're talking about exposure to really, really nasty stuff. So what exactly is the plan here? Fix it for today and hope tomorrow doesn't show up? I don't think so. And more importantly, who is paying the price at the end of the day? So today I am joined by journalist Jordan Gass-Pooré, who is reporting on this very issue and digging into what actually happened at the Franklin Slag Pile and what's being ignored. I recently came across her work at a symposium I was at, and I was like, who is this woman? I have to interview her. This is incredible. Oh my gosh, I do now. Jordan, it's so nice to have you on the show. Thank you for being here for Facts Over Fear.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So let's just start at the most obvious point. How did this pile become a pile? How did this become a thing?
Yeah, so it gets a little bit wonky. And so if I'm looking down folks at home, it's because making sure for accuracy's sake that I'm getting names right. There's a lot of names and a lot of dates, a lot of facts and figures going on here. So we're taking a trip back many, many, many decades ago. And there are two companies that I want to highlight that sort of started what we know of as the Franklin Slag Pile Superfund site. So it all begins with a company called Franklin Smelting and Refining Corp. All right. So this is the Port Richmond neighborhood, a very industrial neighborhood in Philly, and is still very industrial. And that company, they closed in the late 1960s due to pollution violations. Okay, they were a smelting corporation, and so across the street from them, a new company opened up, and this is across the street from them where the slag pile is today. That company was called MDC Industries. They no longer exist. What does still exist is the slag. So what was happening was MDC Industries sold copper slag, which is the slag in the slag pile. That's a byproduct from the smelter that was across the street.
Okay.
And so that slag was being used as a sandblasting material and for asphalt shingles. So they were actually selling it and making a profit off of that slag. But what is remaining in there, obviously, is stuff, I guess, that they couldn't sell. But it's accumulated over time. And I do welcome people to go out to the Port Richmond neighborhood and go out. You can walk. There's a really nice walking area where you can walk right past the slag pile. And it is a giant, giant pile. It looks sort of like a beached whale or just a big black mass coming up from the earth. And so you can see it for yourself there. So yeah, it's at the intersection of Castor and Delaware Avenues. And again, I recommend it's not necessarily an easy journey, and public transportation won't take you quite there. But if you're in Philly and you're curious to see what it looks like for yourself, I recommend, because it was a sight to behold when I went out there. Photos don't do it justice. So.
Jordan, when you started investigating this, you're an independent journalist.
Yeah.
What was the most surprising thing? Because I'm just, I guess, naively, and I don't even know why I'm surprised, because we haven't addressed anything meaningfully, it seems, when it comes to taking care of our environment or our communities. But what was the thing that most surprised you when you started looking into this pile? What made your antenna go up and be like, I got to look into this?
It was the flooding risk. So there's an organization, a nonprofit called Climate Central. And I was looking, they did a report a couple of months ago. They released it called Toxic Tides. And the Franklin Slag Pile Superfund site is actually on this report, and there's hundreds of sites, Superfund and other hazardous sites, not necessarily just Superfund, but they were looking at the impacts of climate change on these hazardous sites, and Franklin Slag was on that list. And so it intrigued me because I mean, Philly has a number of hazardous sites, but what intrigued me the most about this site is that it is in a very industrial neighborhood, like I mentioned. However, the neighborhood has changed, specifically over the COVID-19 pandemic. More people are moving in, have moved into this neighborhood, and seeing this neighborhood as a potential for a bigger population boom and a potential that when this site does get cleaned up, that what's going to happen to this land? Could it be a luxury apartment complex? What sort of remediation plans were in play? And so that's really what got me interested was the flood risks and the potential for more people moving into this neighborhood and people potentially living on this site.
Wow. So when we're talking about the efforts made to clean it up, what does that actually mean? Because it almost sounded to me like they were just trying to like keep it contained. I don't know.
Okay, so I do just want to read out what the EPA said is their current cleanup plan. So the cleanup has not started yet. It's expected to start this summer. Things
Okay.
could change because they haven't started. Even once they start, things could always change, and that deadline could be pushed forward. It's supposed to be completed, the cleanup, by November 2029. I know covering Superfund that those dates usually come and go, and things get pushed forward and forward. But the current cleanup plan is to treat and stabilize the contaminated soil and slag on the site by mixing it with a material that will render it non-hazardous. The EPA will then test, transport, and dispose of the treated material at a permitted off-site facility that they don't know where that facility is going to be yet because they haven't started the cleanup and they haven't, the pile again. You can go by and see it for yourself. Nothing really has changed. So that's the current
Huh.
plan: is to render what's on the site non-hazardous and then to remove it and put it off in an off-site facility in some other community. So usually, I mean, my experience is usually a place in Ohio, but it could be anywhere.
Wow. Hey, if you're
Yes.
from Ohio, you should listen to this.
There's a lot of hazardous stuff that gets put off in facilities,
Really,
licensed facilities in Ohio. Yeah, that's been a common.
that's really fascinating. I can't help but think, okay, they took interest in this, like you said, because more people are coming around, which in a way is problematic in and of itself, that the only time we think any of this through is when there's money to be made. Like you said, if an apartment complex might be wanting to go up or something.
Potentially, that's
Potentially.
the residents' thinking is that
Yeah.
that might
But I
be
think
the
that's a
sense,
fair question and
or a
thought
parking
to
lot.
be thinking about, or a parking lot.
Yeah,
I guess my other question for you then is, okay, let's say they do clean this up, meaning they remove the actual like debris, the physical stuff.
yeah,
What right now would be in the soil itself? Because this stuff, to your point, has been piled on top of itself, and the chemicals from all of this stuff, I would assume, it's rained, it's snowed, it has to
yeah.
go somewhere. Can you talk a little bit about what might be in the ground underneath this pile?
Yeah, because I guess I will take a step back a little bit too. That when you look at the pile, there is a membrane or a sort of tarp, if you will, that's over
Hmm.
the pile to try to contain that giant
Hmm.
mass. So when it's windy, the slag doesn't blow away.
Hmm.
And going through old EPA reports, so in 2000, the EPA started to do some research on the site to see what sort of contaminants were in there. And
Hmm.
in some of these old reports, they had already noticed that the slag had migrated off of the site, even going into the nearby Delaware River, so storm drains.
Wow.
One resident had said that they remember like walking past before they put the tarp over, and she was wondering, like, okay, dirt, like some black, that potentially
Mm.
that it was the wind that had blown the contamination around in the air, and lead is the contaminant number one of concern, is lead. And
Mm.
so there were in these old EPA reports talks of, yes, that lead had been found in the air, so people breathing in the lead from this site. So that also,
Wow.
after reading all of that, really sort of had me want to dig even deeper and wanted to really publish a story about, thinking that we already have experiences of this site before the tarp was put over, of this contamination migrating. And so with the projected or predicted flood risks that, this had already been a concern, migration off the site, with these flood risks that making it even more of a concern. And there are houses, so it's industrial, but it wasn't a far walk from the site to where you get to the first house. So how,
Hmm.
the water will flow down, even if nobody is living on that piece of land or directly beside it, there's still the migration pattern of contamination going into someone's home potentially, or you stepping in it and children around. So there's still that risk. So I just wanted to also flag that the old EPA reports talked about the contamination already migrating off the site.
Can you talk about the larger implication here around the impact of climate change? Because you were just mentioning the flooding. Can you talk about where this is positioned exactly, that that is such a concern? And what do you mean when you say, potential for flooding? Like, how severe would that have to be for it to make an impact, if you know?
Yeah. So I just wanted to also just flag too that the pile is projected to flood once a year or more by 2050, and that was
Oh,
the Climate Central Toxic Tides projections. Was so I it's not my data; it's the Climate Central data
sure.
from their scientists. Yeah, once a year or more by 2050. So
Wow.
it is a very real threat, and it is
Hmm.
the site is close, like I said, to the Delaware River, and they already know that the contamination over time has migrated into the Delaware River and into storm drains. And when you're walking around this site too, because it is industrial, the roads are very much what you would find in many industrial communities because of the big trucks. There needs to be some more investment in roads and some of the other infrastructure in the areas. And that's all to say too is when it floods, it was very obvious to me too how water stays stagnant and goes into the potholed roads, and just having that stuff just sitting there is not necessarily a good thing either. So I think there needs to also be some more work done on infrastructure in that area, especially if people potentially might be even parking their car there. So I also just wanted to flag that.
No, I appreciate that. The more you're talking about it, I know you said that, the residents, there's not anybody like right on this site,
Yeah.
but there's people within like walking distance that live,
Oh, yeah. I
correct?
walked Yeah, correct, yeah, like, I
Yeah.
walked from one side of the Port Richmond neighborhood where there were, bars and restaurants and homes,
Hmm.
and I walked all the way around, and then you have this, like, Delaware River Trail that, goes through, the Port Richmond neighborhood, and I walked around, and that's where you hit the slag pile, and then if you just keep going further, past the slag pile, it doesn't take long for you to hit another home, more restaurants, a bar, so, I mean, yeah, I was walking around the area.
So, having said that, what are the residents saying specifically about how they feel about this pile, this potential cleanup, how it could impact them if it floods? Like you had mentioned, somebody walked by and felt like there was
Yeah, years
grit or
ago, yeah.
dirt. So what is their experience on the daily like being so close to this pile?
Well, I think because it's not, necessarily a place that, you need to walk past
Mhm.
if you
Mhm.
don't work. So there are, facilities because it is industrial still that are still in operation and people are, still working there. But the majority of those folks, have vehicles and aren't just walking around that site. So like most people don't interact with it on a day-to-day basis because they're not walking around there. And most of the folks in Port Richmond that I encountered have vehicles or they need to
Mhm.
take public transportation as they get further into the city or the bus. So they're not interacting with it on a day to day basis. And some of the folks even were like, I had no idea this site
Wow.
existed. And then I walked over there and was like, oh, there's this site that like is a 10-minute walk from my house. Or some folks had said, I used to work at the Franklin, the smelting company
Mm.
that was across the street from the slag pile and said, that's interesting. I didn't even think about that area anymore after like I quit or got laid off from working there. And the EPA, it was interesting to me that the EPA had held community meetings in the past
Mm.
about the site and talking about what the potential cleanup plans might be. They were sort of few and far between, but that's pretty normal from my reporting experience. But the last meeting they had was in 2024. It wasn't well publicized. There is a very active community group that I got in touch with, and Doris, who's mentioned in my article, she is the president of that group. Um, but what I thought was interesting was that when I reached out to the EPA and to the state environmental protection agency too, that that it was interesting. I got, we were in touch. We had calls. They sent me information, and then suddenly, when I had said, "When's the last time you had a community meeting?" They said 2024. I said, "Oh, Doris was right." Then in March 2025, they had a community meeting. So I had already been in touch with them for
Wow.
months prior to that for the reporting. So it was good that I'm hoping maybe in a small part that me pestering them about this site led to a community meeting that I was told had some pretty good turnouts. That meeting was not recorded, unfortunately. It would have been
Hmm.
nice or had like a Facebook Live to have more people, because the community does tend to skew a little bit on the older side,
Hmm.
as well. But they did have another community meeting where they just outlined kind of what I've already told you
Hmm.
about the site. But some of the community members too are like, we would like to have more say in what this land is going to become. We don't necessarily want it to be a luxury apartment complex. Could we have a say in like maybe a community center or something
Yeah.
that could benefit in the end? So I'm hoping there will be more community meetings and the community will be able to have more of a chance to get involved with the future of this site.
I'm always trying to help remind people of the impact of journalists in our communities, of independent journalists in particular. Just for people's own edification, you just explained, I think, so perfectly the need, which is, sort of calling out some things that need called out in ways that you're not trying to create a fuss, but just being there holds power accountable. Can you talk about that from your perspective as a journalist? Why local journalism and why independent work is so important right now?
Yeah, and I think this example that I gave too of the EPA having this community meeting after, about a year of not being in touch with the community, maybe in part because of my pestering them, is I think it's often because where you find Superfund sites and you find hazardous sites are often in communities that, are facing economic hardship, and or, fence line communities, environmental justice communities, people of color that often, I come from a very working class neighborhood and very working class family too, where folks have multiple jobs. They don't necessarily have time to go out to these meetings, which is why I would have loved to have had like a recording or a Facebook Live where people could have watched at a later date, or from their home. But it's very easy to forget about these communities and these places. And even when you are a journalist, say you're a journalist based in Philadelphia, and in a major city, is when a site though is not maybe in front and center or impacting a large group of people or is not impacting tourism, maybe, that it's hard to be able to talk with editors to get those stories through. Or, and as an independent journalist, I think I have more of the freedom with my time and the
Mhm.
freedom to pitch to multiple editors and publications, and to collaborate with people in a different way than a full-time staff member would. And I think that's why it's so important that, independent journalism is so important too, is that you have more of that freedom, and connections with other outlets. So if you got a no from one editor, you can move on as an independent to go and talk to other editors and see. And I'm really lucky that Julie with Green Philly, who I collaborated on this article with, was so receptive of this article and picked this story up. So, and also I just want to flag too with independent journalists that there's a lot of pros, but there's also a lot of cons of being an independent journalist. So
Indeed.
yes,
That's for
as you
that's for
know.
another conversation.
Yes.
Another
So
time when I get to have you back.
yes.
As we wrap up, I want to touch on two things. I want to talk about some of your other work here in a moment, but before I do that, I just want to take sort of the 30,000 view, look here at stuff because I just read this article yesterday when I was thinking about your incredible work here. It just got me concerned about where the EPA is heading, where the Trump administration is starting to dismantle in real time our institutions and our safeguards. And an article yesterday from the BMJ said the following. For the past year, President Donald Trump has been systemically chipping away at the agency's ability, they're talking about the EPA, to monitor and regulate pollution. In March of 2025, for example, the administration announced a list of 31 actions it would take to slash EPA regulations on oil and gas, mercury pollution, carbon emissions, and more. The move was described by the EPA administrator led Zeldin, appointed by Trump, as driving a dagger straight into the heart of the climate change religion. Many of these deregulatory actions have already been accomplished. In January of 2026, the agency issued final nitrogen oxide standards for gas turbines that were much weaker than those proposed in 24 and were full of loopholes. Jordan, as a journalist working in this environmental justice space, is it concerning to you as you investigate areas that need more, not less support as it pertains to environmental health, how much does the tone of this administration play into things like the Franklin Slag Pile being ignored in the future?
Yes. I mean, one, it does make me very, very concerned. And two, that when it comes to the Superfund program, that is the program that is helping to fund the cleanup of the Franklin Slag Pile
Hmm.
and other Superfund sites. And let me tell you, there's more than 1,000 Superfund sites currently on the national priorities list right now. And
Mm.
I have two big issues with a lot of the recent EPA revelations or news is wanting to cut the Superfund budget. I mean, I have here like Trump already has proposed, or the administration cutting $254 million from the Superfund program. He's already cut EPA staff and already cut the budget. This
Wow.
program already has gone through a lot of turmoil in terms of funding. And the whole idea with Superfund was that the polluter was supposed to pay for the cleanup. You pollute, you pay to clean up your mess. We have found
Mhm.
there have been a lot of different loopholes and a lot of different ways where the polluter has not paid, a lot of different ways where it's very difficult to find out who the original polluter was, as in the
Mhm.
case of the Franklin Slag Pile Superfund site. A lot of companies go bankrupt. These are, sites that have been contaminated for decades. So it's very concerning that already this program was on. I wouldn't say its last leg because the Biden administration did put a resurgence of funding back in by saying we're going to bring back the chemical and petroleum excise tax, which some Republicans now want to repeal, which was helping to fund, the Superfund program again. So there's a lot of things that were looking really good for the program in like 2022. And now it's starting to look kind of dark again. And even though
Mm.
the administration, I want to highlight, says that they're really interested, Lee Zeldin's really, said he's really interested in cleaning up as many Superfund sites as possible. He also wants to get rid of the research component of the Superfund process. The research component is a very critical component of the cleanup process for these sites. It helps determine what contaminants are in this site. Where are they migrating?
Mm.
You get rid of that. I feel like it's going to be sort of a quick and easy, done and dirty. And years down the road, these sites that used to be on the Superfund are going to be put back. And we have sites like that already. We have Superfund sites that were cleaned up, found out wasn't really cleaned up, got put back on the list, and then has to
Mm.
sit for decades, and those communities suffer. We all suffer. I mean, with more than 1,000 Superfund sites, you'd be surprised at how close you live to one. I'm here in Queens, New York right now. I
Mhm.
live within walking distance of 3 of the 4 federal Superfund sites in New York City.
I should never play poker because I have the worst poker face. As you're talking, I'm just like over like, what are you? I
You
mean,
can
this is
search. You can
right?
search
I
search
mean,
and see where,
this is wild, Jordan. I mean, I so appreciate the work that you're doing because, like I said, I was unaware of this Franklin slag pile until I heard about this. And once again, this is why we need people that are willing to investigate into these situations that impact all of us. So as we
we
round this
do.
out, you're doing a lot of incredible things outside of this project. Can you share a little bit about your other work?
Yeah. So prior to working on this article, I did a podcast about the impacts of climate change on Superfund sites in New Jersey. Believe it or not, New Jersey has the most Superfund sites out of any state in the US. They have 115 the last time I checked. So we did a limited series that was with NJPBS, which I will flag NJPBS come June will no longer exist.
Hmm.
And with NJ Spotlight News. And then I did a spinoff series called Hazard NYC for Hazard New York City, and that was with a local publication called The City. And both of these projects were with local outlets. And so I just highly recommend people support local journalism and local outlets because once they're gone, they may never come back. And so flagging again that PBS affiliate in a state in this country will no longer exist because they don't have funding come June. So those two projects have been big passion projects of mine. And unfortunately, even though Hazard New Jersey and Hazard NYC, we won awards, all the stuff, and funding cuts. We are no longer doing those projects. So, but I highly recommend people check them out because it's still very relevant information if you're interested in Superfund.
No, I so appreciate that. And unfortunately, here in Pennsylvania, across the state, we're also dealing with many outlets disappearing or being shrunk down next to nothing. So, as an independent journalist myself, I feel you. And
Yes.
I hope you know you can always come back onto Facts Over Fear, whatever you're working on, and share
Thank you.
updates, or if there's just topics happening around environmental work that you just want to weigh in on or share information to help educate this audience. I would absolutely love to have you.
Well, thank you. Yes, and I welcome that invitation and would love to come back.
Wonderful. I appreciate you, Jordan. If people want to learn more about your work, if they want to read more about what you're up to, especially around the Franklin Slag Pile, where can they go?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Blue Sky, and you can find me at J Gass-Pooré without the hyphen. And so it's pretty much the same. Yeah, if you just search, I think I'm the only person in the world with this last name. So very easy to find, and I very much welcome. And if anyone else has any questions, I'm always open to DMs and whatnot. So yes.
Awesome. I also recommend checking out her website because I looked at your website and it's just really cool the way you have it. So just a total fangirl over here. I so appreciate you.
Well, thanks.
Thank you so much for joining me for Facts Over Fear. And as always, everyone, until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Thanks again, Jordan.
Thank you.